this has been one of the locations of some of the greatest parts of my childhood. In fact, a really significant moment in my growing up is when my high school sweetheart, Elizabeth, and I, now my wife of 25 years and a month and a week and a day, had a sort of torrid romance the summer after graduation from high school. We're going to go separate ways to different colleges, to Use Guys Land and still to Y'all Land. And so we stayed on the mountain all night, not supposed to do that. Oh, you can climb too. I'm terrified of the funicular thing. But we stayed up on top of the mountain. That's us back then. We'd been up all night. We have tearful goodbyes. We've wiped the tears, or we're going to go separate ways. And we're going to do what so many people have done. You'll see as you climb up the mountain. That is, we're going to carve our initials into the granite of Stone Mountain. Now, has anyone here ever tried to carve in granite? How did it go? It's not easy. It's very, very hard rock. So we did this for like 4 hours. You could hear it all the way to downtown. We were sure the police SWAT teams were going to come. And we made a scratch. It was going to be the beginning of Michael Loves Elizabeth. We were here to scratch. So we made a little scratch. Well, the very best part of Stone Mountain, that was a sad day, is the laser show. If you're young, you say, Mom, Dad, can I stay until nighttime? Please, I want to see the laser show. And you gather on this lawn, and then the entire space is lit up by these lasers. They seem to come from everywhere. They illuminate the carving, flashlights illuminate, and then there's fireworks at the end. And they're playing Proud to Be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and these patriotic songs, and it's great. This was my childhood growing up. That same year, this is 1989, I'm on that lawn, which you can see, surrounded by those people, and I have one of life's epiphanies. It's a band trip, because even the band went there to celebrate as president of the band. And I look around at the crowd, and something occurs to me that never occurred to me in 17 years of going there. Why am I surrounded by white people? Where are all the black people? That lawn looked a lot like this room, actually. And I asked myself, why would that be? And then I looked up, and it occurred to me, what may be obvious to you already, is that we were standing in the shadow of the largest Confederate monument carving in the galaxy. 190 feet wide, 90 feet tall, 42 feet deep at General Robert E. Lee's elbow. I'd never connected that with this public state park. In fact, that's Robert E. Lee and General Stonewall Jackson and Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy, striding on their horses with dignity and honor, with their hearts covered by their hats, men of honor. And as the lasers touch them, the lasers animate them, and the horses begin to gallop, and the men take off their hats and put them on, and they're dramatizing a phrase I'd heard off and on, usually from drunk kids, but also from serious people: the South will rise again, which means the South should not have lost the Civil War. We should have won, which would mean we would be living in some strange Philip K. Dick, Man in the High Castle version where slavery was still allowed and white people could still own black people. And it occurred to me that I was at maybe the nation's largest white pride rally and had been there for 20 years, and it was completely inadvertent. And I felt sick. I watched the laser show in distracted disgust. If this were a movie, it would have gone like fisheye and screechy violins. And how did I respond to this? Oh, sorry, one more image. I looked around, and there were families there, but yes, there were also guys that looked like that with Confederate flags, often in the backs of their pickup trucks with gun racks, and they were cheering, and where at least I know I'm free sounded hollow and false, and all of a sudden I understood why there were no black people around me. I realized that this was a public space where I was welcome and others felt unwelcome, that I was enfranchised in a way others were disenfranchised, and I had never noticed it before because I look vaguely like these people. I saw invisible signs around me in my imagination, like these that I took 2 weeks ago at the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. Go. It was my daughter's first experience of Washington, D.C. Imagine entering into D.C. through that experience. My mother saw these actually in college, but I realized they were all over my world, and I had the blindness not to be able to see them. I began wondering, where else are they, these signs? My wife and I went to a pretty posh private high school. I was poor and smart, so I got to go for free. And it was established, Westminster was in 1955. What happened in 1954? Brown versus Board of Education, segregation of schools. My high school was established to save white people from going to school with black people. Let's go back to Stone Mountain, because I began learning a little bit more about it too. It used to be privately owned, and it was the location of the second embodiment of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. This is 1913, 1915. Notice the Imperial Wizard. This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a national newspaper. Klan is established with impressiveness. I didn't know about this. It was never mentioned in my Georgia history class. Here it is in 1949. My aunt and uncle would actually have been courting here at that point. He went to Candler Theological Seminary, died 2 months ago. Filled with people in white sheets. There were lynchings at Stone Mountain. It became a state park. The state park is called Stone Mountain, a monument to the Confederacy. They don't advertise that much anymore, but that's what its purpose was. It opened in 1965. What's going on in 1965? Civil rights movement. It's funny how all those Southern monuments started popping up, how much we love the Confederacy during the Civil Rights Movement, 2 years after the I Have a Dream speech. Harder history question. That date is the day of the opening as a state park, April 14th, 1965. Historians, others, what happened 100 years to the day before April 14th? That would be 1865. Death of Abraham Lincoln. Process that for a second. Thank you, Fawn. This park was opened. My childhood playground was opened to commemorate the assassination of the American president who freed the slaves. I'm disgusted by that. I'm not unracist. I try to be anti-racist. How did I respond? I responded through renunciation. For a good while, I stopped saying I'm Southern. I violated that trust. I said I'm Midwestern. I've been here longer than anywhere else. I wanted to distance myself from things I found abhorrent because I was complicit in them. I had benefited unwittingly from things I find morally repugnant, and I could not deal with that. But over the last decade, as we've had the Confederate monuments discussion, as they get knocked down again and again, this is the largest one. I'm curious what will happen to it. I almost can't imagine defacing it. I really don't know what should be done about it. Someone said put Rosa Parks on there. I don't know if that's right, but I have re-owned my Southern identity. But it's an ambivalent, kind of queasy identity where I love the land I'm from, and I'm deeply ashamed of it. I am myself, and yet I'm sick about certain parts of my identity and my story. But I think embracing that, living in the cognitive dissonance, is realer, is a lot closer to the truth than simple patriotism or regionalism. So since I was uncomfortable, and I'm a teacher, I thought, I want my students to be uncomfortable too. Isn't that what we do, purvey creative discomfort? So I created a class and called it LSD because I like provocative acronyms. My other class is HELL, History of the English Language. This stands for Language, Story, Difference. In this class, I want students, it's an honors course, though I'm filtering some of it into my lit context class. I wanted students to have an opportunity to do the same reevaluation of their identities, no matter what that identity is, while hearing other narratives, counter-narratives about Europe and America. We read Othello about the African general in the Venetian army. We read Frederick Douglass, who says that slavery corrupts not only the slave, but the slave owner. We read Neither Wolf Nor Dog, read that book, Neither Wolf Nor Dog, in which an Indian elder and a white man, through conversation, very difficult conversation, come to familyhood, brotherhood, through acknowledge of genocide and racial atrocities. We read Coates, of course, who helped me understand better, see better what it would be like to live in America while having brown or black skin. And one of the things we learn about colonization, slavery, American Indian genocide, we don't have that replace the Enlightenment and the Declaration of Independence and the ideals towards which we aspire. We just tell a larger, fuller story in which we haven't lived up to those ideals. One image from that class, we learn about the colonization of the Congo. My students are shocked to find out when that happened. But one man, basically responsible for colonizing the Congo, Central Africa, Leopold II of Belgium, remember that name, we'll come back, personally claimed for himself 1 million square miles of the Congo and all its inhabitants and resources. He wanted to extract from it rubber from the trees for bicycle tires, and later car tires, and of course ivory. And in the course of doing that, he was responsible for the death of 11 million people, we think. Hard to find records. If Hitler's Holocaust of the Jews, 6 million is one unit, this man is responsible for 2 Holocausts. How familiar are we with his story? Why? What was his name again? Say his name. Leopold II of Belgium did this. And he was pretty sophisticated in terms of his photographic rhetoric. If people didn't work hard enough, children, adults, he would have their limbs amputated and send images back to Europe of their black stumps, notice carefully displayed against white cloths. Notice the overlord pointing at the stump there. This was to demonstrate to Europe the progress of the light of European civilization and religion in Shakespeare through darkest Africa, Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Another narrative about exploration, a counter-narrative. So why do I call my class LSD? Well, yeah, there's a pun there. I've never taken the drug, but I understand that you can have a bad trip on LSD, and I tell my students at the beginning of the class that not only is nausea a possible side effect of this class, it's a course goal. And I assess that later on. I ask them, how are you feeling about this class, what we're learning? They said, this class has made me more nauseated, more disgusted than any class I've ever taken. And what else can we read together? They demanded to know why they were not taught this during their education, why they'd not heard about this. And they said, how can I know more? Their nausea left them hungry for more nauseating material. Quick side note, one of the God things. We have garage sale days, and so I'm walking that way, just 2 buildings that way, 2 houses, and I find these 1930s geography books. And I think, no, if I don't look at these, no one will. So I pick them up, and someone's grandmother, maybe she's still alive, had these as her introduction to, the world. And it contains, 1936, Introduction to World Geography, sentences like this. When a country such as England rules other countries at a distance, we call it an empire. Sounds like an algebra formula, doesn't it? There are no amputee photographs in that. And this, in Asia and Africa, older countries had become weak, and newer countries took their places. If whitewashed means anything, I think that's whitewashed. And my students are responsible for all of these tabs of check out what we were taught, what our grandparents were taught in history. I want to stress to my students that what they're experiencing does not come out of a liberal agenda, which has infected me and all of academia. I stack the course firmly on the Bible. We spend 2 weeks reading the Old Testament and the New Testament, scripture on outsiders, stories, rules about outsiders. Let me read you one. Leviticus 19. When an alien lives among you, chosen people, do not mistreat him or her. He must be treated as one of your native born. Love him as yourself. Note this. For you were aliens in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. I love those 2 statements. What's the warrant? What's the reason you should be good to those who live among you, who are aliens, outsiders, foreigners, refugees? You were slaves in Egypt. You know what it feels like. You can be sensitive to the voices of the outsiders and the marginalized because you've experienced it. You can know that I am God better because you were slaves. I don't know these things, but I think The captivities, Egypt, Babylon, Rome, might be preparation for God's people to do kingdom work. I began with Stone Mountain. Let me end with one more quick Bible verse and one more return to stone. And that was the Stone Mountain of Solomon's temple. We read in 2 Chronicles that when Solomon wanted to build the house of God after the wanderings, he first did this. He first took a census of all the native-born, of all the tribes, and of all the aliens. Summarizing, there were 153,000 aliens. He assigned 70,000 to be carriers, 80,000 to be stone cutters, 3,600 to be foremen. That means the temple, the house of God, the dwelling place of the Most High, including the Holy of Holies, where the high priest could only enter once a year, it was built by aliens and outsiders. Because God has a heart for foreigners, maybe their status was the best job qualification for that. So let me tell you who I am in this story. I'm a Southerner. I am white. I am male. That's my LSD picture. I am straight. I am heterosexual. That's the same thing. I'm cisgender. I'm even right-handed. I have an Ivy League education, and I have an upper-class middle income. And I can tell you honestly that I've racked my memory. I have never been in a situation where I've knowingly been discriminated against. And I'm sure at least half the room cannot identify with that. Belonging to none of these categories has ever caused me a material loss in power. But figuring out who I am and figuring out who God is in this journey, I've realized some other things. Learning who I am involves listening to the voices of others. Understanding my role in the story of the world and God's kingdom means listening to more voices of minorities, which I was deprived of hearing at Stone Mountain. More voices of immigrants, First Nation people, medievalists of different schools than my own, the African American, the Hispanic American, gay and lesbian, trans people, the Trump voter, the immigrant, the refugee, the outsider, because without their stories, I have some severe disadvantages. I believe I'm empathy challenged. My field rests on empathy. As Joel said, we experience others' stories along with them. Having never been a minority or disadvantaged, I think I come into this world empathy challenged. I read the Beatitudes and wonder if I'm disadvantaged because of my status. I even wonder if I'm kingdom marginalized and at risk of kingdom disenfranchisement because I am a white, straight male with an education. Without knowing the stories of others, without knowing diverse stories, I can't begin to know myself, nor can I know who God is. That's what I know about myself today.